what percentage of Trump's appeal do you think is his, his celebrity, his charisma, his name ID, and what percentage do you think is the issues that he touched upon? And like, look, I think even the most comical Trumpists without Trump would concede that Trump is a very powerful vessel for these ideas. I think that's only a caricature wouldn't say that. But, I remember I think that to this day, in a weird way, nothing's changed in 7 years, where there's just a ton of people who actually believe it's just all Trump and it doesn't matter what he says. And I think if he had run in the summer of 2015 and had taken the advice of neoconservative consultants and, run on war and open borders, and, no examination of our trade regime, I think he would have gotten blown out. And I mean, I just almost tired of saying it, but if you look at Trump's numbers in June 2015, this is a guy with Oprah name recognition. He had been running for president quasi since the 80s. He was at 3%, and he came down the escalator and he talked about foreign policy, trade, and immigration in this searing, vivid way. And by 4th of July, he was number one, and he has not let up being number one in a decade.
Howdy, everyone, and welcome back to Moment of Truth, the podcast of American Moment. My name is Saurabh Sharma. I'm the president of American Moment and executive director of the Edmund Burke Foundation, and I'm joined by
Nick Solheim, just the COO of American Moment, I guess.
That's a pretty low energy introduction to season 4 of Moment of Truth. We are back. We are poorly rested from our hiatus because we were working the entire time, and we are here for another year of fantastic episodes for you guys. 2024 is going to be a year of a ton of interesting developments in all the topics we like to cover here on Moment of Truth, and we are excited to have you guys along for the ride. Today we had on a very dear friend of this organization, a returning guest from the early days. I think he has a single-digit episode. I think it was episode 8, an august honor to have been on this podcast that long ago. Curt Mills, the new executive director of the American Conservative. But before I get to that, as always, be sure to go to AmericanMoment.org. There you can find everything we have cooking here. We have recently closed on a spring fellowship class. They'll be starting here in mid-February. But guess what? We have a summer fellowship class as well. Apply. If you want to get involved here in Washington, D.C. and think you're just going to waltz into some important role in the next presidential administration in January 2025, you are high. You need to get here. You need to build some connections. You need to get into a junior role so that we can help you get that important role in the next administration. And the best way to do that is through our Fellowship for American Statecraft. Our summer lunch series on Capitol Hill is starting up soon. Again, that's AM Fridays. Reach out to us or go to the website if you'd like to sign up for that, whether you're a Hill office that wants to send your kids to get red pilled by our speakers or someone who just wants free Chick-fil-A. We're open to any and all levels of cynicism. And be sure to always check out the backlog of this podcast as well. This week we had on Curt Mills, who, like I mentioned, is the new executive director of the American Conservative, off from a stint in California in hedge fund world for 2 years. Curt is the executive director of the American Conservative, where he previously served as contributing editor and senior reporter. He specializes in foreign policy and campaign coverage and has worked at The National Interest, U.S. News and World Report, Washington Examiner, and The Spectator. His work has appeared in Unheard and Newsweek. He was 2018-2019 Robert Novak Journalism Fellow. Campaigns and foreign policy, super light topics for 2024, or, super major topics. We have 2 major wars in regions of the world where wars tend to spiral out of control, and a pretty major election coming up. So Curt has joined TAC at the exact moment he should have. And we had a fantastic wide-ranging discussion on basically those topics. We talked about 2024, who's up, who's down, what's about to happen here. Not your traditional horse race coverage, but a deeper analysis of what's going on and the 2 conflicts that are anchoring the world right now. What is going on in the Ukraine and what is going on with the Hamas. I find that adding the in front of these things is something that a certain type of person on the internet is a big stickler for, so I will oblige. And then we talked about what Curt's vision for the American Conservative is. And then in a special members only segment, our YouTube membership program, where if you pay a couple bucks a month, you can be either a truther or a statesman and get access to a special members only segment where we talked about a bunch of random crap, to be entirely honest. We talked about watches. We talked about who's over-indexed and under-indexed in both parties, why Curt thinks the world isn't going to end. It was fantastic. It's a lot of bantering. If you enjoy this podcast and want to support it, that's the way to do it. We put in a ton of resources into making sure this podcast looks really good on camera. And so go to YouTube, sign up for one of these subscriptions. We highly encourage you to do so. Look, putting together this podcast is not easy, and we burn the midnight oil here at American Moment. And so we caffeinate ourselves quite a bit. And in addition to your caffeine, you can make yourself quite a bit more productive with the people helping us out with the podcast this week, Magic Mind. Magic Mind is this little green shot that is full of fantastic ingredients. Just reading off some of them. We've got matcha green tea, organic agave, passion fruit, natural vanilla, organic olive oil, ashwagandha, just a bunch of fantastic stuff. I take this with my coffee every morning at the office, and it makes me less of a miserable tyrant to work for and with. And so I highly encourage you guys to check them out. If you go to magicmind.co/truth20, you can get up to 56% off of your first subscription or 20% off your first one-time purchase. There's all sorts of good stuff in this that helps really even you out, makes you focused, dialed in for the day. All of you Adderall junkies, you don't need it. You just need some Magic Mind. It will help make you a little less jittery and a little less of a type A annoying person here in Washington, D.C. Nick, what did you make of the episode that we just did with Curt?
Talking with Curt is always a trip, man. I come out of these conversations I have with him or phone calls, and I feel somehow conspiratorial, even though I haven't said anything incriminating. Mm-hmm. So we're going to let you in on some of the secrets of what's going on, and hopefully you'll enjoy it as much as I did. It
was a fantastic episode. We will go now to Mr. Curt Mills. Howdy, Curt. Thank you for coming back on the podcast.
We got to stop meeting like this.
Yeah, you were here 3 years ago in a different distinctive sweater, and you predicted doomsday, and so you're here again.
Yes.
Welcome.
Yes. 19 degrees and snowing here. So,
that's right. Yes. It's utterly absurd weather. Welcome back. You spent 2 years in sunny Los Angeles and are being reminded all at once why that might be better. But you are the newly minted executive director of the American Conservative. It is your job to know all things about all things, but we're specifically going to focus on some particularly newsy items for this here season premiere. First, there was an Iowa caucus.
Trump cruised, obviously.
Is that obvious?
Apparently not. I mean, it was amazing. I thought it was a clear mandate. I think a lot of people thought he was going to get in the 40s. He got about 50. That's about what I thought. I was on the bullish end of it. But it's amazing, like the clockwork, which the talking points came out. Well, that means half the party's anti-him. And putting aside like that's like obviously farcical that Ramaswamy's clearly accrues to him, and it's not even clear that I think DeSantis' voters net accrue to Trump. But putting that aside, the fact that was the immediate PR spin on this from, I don't know, Establishment Conservative Inc. Was, even for my low opinion of their analytical ability, pretty much stunned me. And so
you think that, presumably, if you take the net of what you just said, Nikki Haley will stick it out through the end?
I mean, I think that the base case, it seems like everybody thinks this is going to last through South Carolina or Super Tuesday, and by last, these elections will be held. But like, you know, basically the question is, DeSantis, Haley both drop out. That's what it ends for all intents and purposes. And so I think there's like a 40% chance that DeSantis will drop out earlier than we think. But then I also think there's a 40% chance that they could actually blow past Super Tuesday through just sheer Captain Ahab, Pequod, Moby Dick stuff. Just absolutely insane. I mean, the Cruz stuff in 2016, Ted Cruz, wasn't rational for the rest of his career. I'm not sure it super damaged him. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. But you know, I think hive minds take hold in these campaigns. Like anything, you guys run a plucky little startup, and like if things were to go badly for you, and they have not, notably throughout your history, strange psychoses can can take hold. And
strange psychoses keep this place afloat. What are you talking
about? Look, I don't want to pick on the DeSantis thing like too much. I think like most people found him to be the clear best governor of the country. Very impressive in 21, 22. But this campaign, I would not have believed that a campaign in 24 would have been notably potentially as bad as Jeb Bush's campaign in 16. And I think it's neck and neck.
So I got to ask you the low-hanging fruit question, because this, as you mentioned, is evidently not obvious to most people on Twitter. What does this victory mean for the future of the conservative movement, of the Republican Party, etc.?
Yeah, I think there's no going back. I mean, I have always thought there was no going back, but there's a lot of people who have, by always, I mean like since 2016, since 2017, but there have always been a lot of people with prominent perches in media and politics on the conservative side who believe the direct opposite, and they have access to resources and support to litigate that question, apparently forever. And so we will just keep doing this. But I think this gets fundamentally to the question. I remember this is kind of going around in 2017, like what percentage of Trump's appeal do you think is his celebrity, his charisma, his name ID, and what percentage do you think is the issues that he touched upon? And like, look, I think even the most comical Trumpists without Trump would concede that Trump is a very powerful vessel for these ideas. I think that's only a caricature wouldn't say that. But I remember I think that to this day, in a weird way, nothing's changed in 7 years, where there's just a ton of people who actually believe it's just all Trump and it doesn't matter what he says. And I think if he had run in the summer of 15 and had taken the advice of neoconservative consultants and, run on war and open borders, and, no examination of our trade regime, I think he would have gotten blown out. And I mean, I just almost tired of saying it, but if you look at Trump's numbers in June 2015, this is a guy with Oprah name recognition. He had been running for president quasi since the 80s. He was at 3%, and he came down the escalator and he talked about foreign policy, trade, and immigration in this searing, vivid way. And by 4th of July, he was number one, and he has not let up being number one in a decade.
One of the people we've gotten to know over the years that has been an absolutely fantastic young entrepreneur in the political space is Ari at Upward.News. Look, many of the subscribers to this podcast are extraordinarily sophisticated news consumers. You guys know everything about everything, but sometimes when it comes to communicating with friends, people back home, or even keeping up with some of those stories that you just don't have the time to pay attention to, it helps to have an outlet that you can trust that will distill it down to the very basics. That's what Upward.News is, whether it's their email newsletters that dive deep on the stories that matter every single day, following them on Instagram or Twitter, where they regularly put out succinct summations of what exactly is going on with every major news story. They are a fantastic website to get to know and subscribe to. Once again, that's Upward.News. Follow them on social media. They're a fantastic news company doing great things, and we're honored to have them partner with us on Moment of Truth. It's news from a perspective that you can trust, daily briefs that bring you need to know news and insights you won't find in the mainstream media. They have plenty of free products as well as paid products alike, depending on how much you end up using their services. We highly recommend you check it out. That's Upward.News. Are the Iowa caucuses dead? So it feels like every 4 years we get a series of memes drilled into our head. Whoever the governor of Iowa is, the term the full Grassley, Bob Vanderplatz. There are these things that suddenly all the very smart people, title case, know about. It seems like none of it mattered. Everyone, Trump flew into Iowa 4 times maybe and sweeped. Do you think that retail politics and specifically the Iowa caucuses are dying as a concept, as a meaningful function in American politics, where they elevate otherwise unknown candidates or can be a proving ground for challengers? What do you think about that?
If I were to give any credence to what you just said, I would say it's nothing specifically about Iowa, which is it's the larger question of, does literally anything matter besides Twitter X, right? Because I'm trying to figure that out running a magazine, right? And so I think that it's why it's due respect to our colleague here who lives in West Virginia. But, the question is whether or not is it just all a LARP? It's just everybody's living the same thing with Amazon and Twitter, and so I think that's kind of what you're getting at. I don't know. That's kind of the question of the era. To the question of Iowa specifically, Iowa's great. It's awesome. It has a
butter cow negative 180 degrees.
Inscrutably complicated electoral process. Comically old population, comically white population. There's great characters. There's the Vanderbilt's person who comes up every 4 years. No, it rocks, and I think it's here to stay. I think the Democrats made a mistake, rejiggering their calendar in this gangster fashion, and I'm against pretty much all technocratic reforms. So I don't like the ranked choice voting that much. I don't want to see national primary days. I want to see I want grinded out. You want
fragmented particularism.
Sure, it's fine.
You got to
totally
have content to feed the machine.
It's totally fine. It's fine. And I also, I'm not even sure it really matters. DeSantis, just beating up on him now, invested all of his game in Iowa, and DeSantis has run a subpar campaign, and he did not win in the thing that he invested in most. And I think that would have happened in any other way of doing this. I'm not a zealot on this. I think there are certain primary arrangements which could, accrue to one candidate or another in a particularly close race, right? Like Obama, Hillary was I think Hillary literally got more votes in 2008, which everybody sleeps on. Sanders, Hillary was very close in 16. Maybe a different style would have helped Sanders a little more, maybe. But in general, I think this stuff is just things for nerds to talk about. I think I was fine. I think retail politics are here to stay. And last point on it, I don't think if Trump didn't have a demonstrated brand and pedigree and record of being able to talk to human beings, that he would have been able to just sort of phone it in, as you imply.
Yeah, I mean, Saurabh brought up an interesting point about, Trump only flying into Iowa 4 or maybe fewer times. I'm thinking back to all the videos I've seen of the different events that people have done in Iowa. Particularly Nikki Haley does a lot of these more intimate, style affairs versus the Trump rock concert, type experience where everybody's screaming and they're so excited. What do you think? This is kind of an off the wall question, but what do you think about the different way that he does political events versus the way that other candidates have done them in the past?
Yeah, didn't McKay Coppins just say that everyone should go to a Trump rally?
Yeah, I mean, he did say that. I mean, I think the rock concert characterization is absolutely right for Trump. Although, I mean, I would say it's not they're super. I mean, Trump can only do a rock concert at this point because these things are overflow crowds, and Haley can only do these intimate events, as you termed it, because she can't fill a massive stadium in Iowa, I don't think. And additionally, her model is obviously more donor driven, and so it kind of makes sense to do these sort of small salons, for lack of a better description. I don't know. The Trump rallies have always been a thing. I remember there was this rally in Iowa in 2016 where I think this time 4 years ago. I think Iowa was later in 2016, and so it was still going on, the campaign, and there was some guy who came into a Cruz rally and just started screaming at Cruz. Ted Cruz looks weird. He looks weird, folks. He looks weird. It's very strange. Why is no one talking about it? And then the guy proceeded to swiftly vomit in a trash can. and Cruz made some joke oh, I guess they let the bars out a little early, and the guys clearly had been to more than a bar, I would say. But if he had done that at Trump's rally, I especially in 2016, I think he might have gotten like killed versus like the Cruz rally, like was like, oh, a little weird, you know. I mean, Rand Paul's rallies, that there's always had this, maybe he could have gotten roughed up, but like the Trump rallies, you know, always do have this Hell's Angels backdrop to it, and America loves rock stars. So it's a frontier country.
Yeah. Do you think that anything that any of the candidates did this cycle would have resulted in a different result?
I mean, DeSantis is just going to murder me. Yeah, I think you got to run a better campaign. I mean, perhaps this would have always accrued to Trump, but I think he clearly, you know, the sort of DeSantis HQ line, I feel like, is always that like Trump is somehow like not Republican enough, and like DeSantis is like Mr. Republican. This is like a strange, weird subtext on it. But like in a lot of ways, DeSantis reminds me of the campaign he's run has reminded me of the old critique of the Democrats, which is that they kind of stick their hand up in the wind and decide what they remember the Kerry ad in 2004, you know, showed Kerry windsurfing, right? And like that was like a sort of allegory for how he decided to make decisions. And I think that this is just foreign policy is my focus and love. I mean, I think when DeSantis gave his answer on Ukraine to Carlson in April of 2023, and his answer was frankly softer and more equivocal than Governor Kristi Noem, who I didn't know had any view on the Ukraine war. Yeah. I was like, this is a problem. And, you know, maybe voters don't think about the Ukraine error quite as ideologically as I do, but I think they could smell that answer wasn't genuine in the slightest.
So moving on to Ukraine, you run the publication that has been more correct than any other conservative publication on foreign policy for the last 20 years. You yourself are a pretty prominent foreign policy reporter in your own right. How goes the war? What's going to happen?
The Ukraine war?
Yeah.
I think Ukraine is losing pretty badly. I think Russia had a bad 2022, to put it mildly. I think both things can be true. So the Russia Super Bowl case was just wrong in 2022. That doesn't.
Can you explain that? What was the Super Bowl case?
I think that a lot of people, I think most people subscribe to the Russia Bowl case. I didn't have a firm view on it. I mean, you have to really like find. I don't think you can find me saying anything on it. I think there was just like an assumption that they would roll into Kiev and just take the place, and that is wrong, and did not occur.
Did they try to do that?
They were bombing Kiev in a way that was menacing and targeted in a way that seemed like they might. And then there have been all these isolated reports, but it's Eurasia, so just like don't believe any of the reports. But there have been like reports about like assassination, kill squads to get Zelensky in the winter of that year. But you know, just because the first year was a mess up for the Russians, a lethal mess up, doesn't mean that that's the end game. Doesn't mean that's the trajectory that the war would end on. And I think a lot of people are really stuck in 2022 on that. And I think meanwhile, the Russians have been able to eke out gains, and they have the whip hand, because the Ukraine thing doesn't really actually make any sense. Like it doesn't, like the case doesn't make sense for why it's American interests. And if it really is in the European interests, they're certainly not spending money in a way that, I mean, if you think if something was like literally an existential threat, you would think you would spend 3% of your money on it.
So tease out the European dynamics.
If I thought I was going to die,
yeah,
I think I would spend 3% of my net worth on it. And like the Germans can't do that.
Yeah. So tease out the European dynamics here. What do the French want? What do the Germans want? What exactly is going on in Europe? Because I think that from an American vantage point, and especially the special, unique order, low bar for sophistication that I would assign American conservative media, Europe is monolith. But obviously these countries have different, distinct and disparate interests. What exactly are the dynamics going on the continent, and how are they playing out either for or against the Ukrainian interests in this war.
You're saying like the conservative monolith take is that European. So
people don't pay attention. They don't know anything about Europe.
Right. Okay. I mean, so I think that we essentially have fairly archetypal governments in the 4 capitals that truly matter in Europe. And so in London, you have, I think Sunak is actually relatively reasonable, but in general, he basically heads a party that behaves like a British Conservative Party does, which is to say they kind of LARP at being an empire. They are often more hawkish than Washington and are just perplexing and weird. But that's a very real thing that they do. Boris Johnson, the former prime minister, was a comical caricature of this dynamic before his party sagely removed him from office. But I think that's basically the British position. I think the French are essentially returned, especially Macron is like also a parody of a French prime minister. President. He is returning to type, which is that France sees its, I think rightly sees its killer app on the international scene as diplomacy, and so France is trying to insert itself as a major player in any negotiation. And then B, they are one of the more dovish major countries in Europe on the Russia matter. I mean, I think Macron earnestly tried to avoid a war, which he was mocked for, but like, I don't know, maybe it would have been better if we didn't do this war. Then hundreds of thousands of Russians and Ukrainians might agree. And so I think that's essentially the messaging out of Élysée, and especially because Macron is term limited. He pretty much can't run in 27. There is isolated reporting that he thinks that's dumb and would like to run in 27. But
that'd be cool.
Yeah.
I want to see that.
Yeah. Berlin, it's like, so it's a little confusing, but the SPD, the Social Democratic Party, which is probably like vaguely to the left of where the Democrats are now, although obviously don't have it's sort of Germany's different culture than America. That party has traditionally been the more dovish party on Russia. The last SPD chancellor, Gerhard Schröder, was like a lobbyist for Putin, and he's on a board of several Russian companies. Yeah, fascinating.
He's chairman of Gazprom, right?
Yeah. Chairman of the board, not the head of it, but that's and so I think there was this weird situation where Scholz really felt he had to like prove that he wasn't weak, and so accordingly German policy was more hawkish than expected, perhaps because of also he's in a coalition essentially with like extreme normally libertarian people on the one hand, and then it's called the FDP, and then he's also in coalition with the Greens, who have become weirdly hawkish on Russia. Also, Russia's a sort of petro state, so that makes sense. But that's actually a shift in policy. And then Italy finally
is it because it's the only Green Party in Europe that the Russians don't fund, because they fund the center left party?
I don't know the exact dynamics of funding of the last Russian fund, the most famous notorious financing of a political party in Russia was the political party by the Russians in Europe, was the loan that they gave to Le Pen's party in the mid 2010s, which they've never lived down, even though in theory it's a loan, they just pay back, but perhaps find another bank. But and then I think Meloni was the sort of same thing with Scholz, which is like she felt Meloni in Italy felt that because she was seen as Russia sympathetic, that she had to go completely the other direction. But I think like if you're like a Margaret Thatcher impersonator, which exists in Britain, they
exist here.
They do. And I think you don't feel great about the governmental constructions of France, Italy, and Germany. Like the leaders like don't believe in this stuff at all. And then even the British Prime Minister doesn't, I think, uber believe it within the ranks of the Tories. And so, it's a nasty setup. I think in Biden.
And so the only reason they stick to it is because it's largely costless.
Why do they stick to it?
Yeah. If they're all shaky.
I think, I mean, I don't want to like imply like extreme cynicism here. I think there is like an actual view that like they believe their own propaganda, which is like if Putin is allowed to take Donetsk, that's the same thing as Hitler taking Warsaw, and like it'll just be an endless Manichaean world of people just. I mean, I think people actually believe he's going to like invade Poland, and like that will be allowed, which I think is laughable. Like the United States has Article 5 treaty obligations to Poland. We don't seem exactly trigger shy. I think if Putin tries to invade Poland, we're going to war. So I think it's sort of like a non sequitur, but yeah.
Yeah, it's always 1939 to these people,
right.
You know? So why is that? This is something interesting that I actually haven't seen a lot of people talk about. Like, why is that not the case? Why is it not, aside from Article 5, why is it not 1939?
Well, I mean, just like 90% of all movies ever made are about Hitler. So, I mean, it's just like, you know.
It's kind of in the zeitgeist.
Yeah, so sort of in the zeitgeist. Why is it not the case? Because the Russian Federation is trying to subsume parts of a state that didn't exist independently and existed within their own borders within my lifetime, not yours. Soviet Union existed when I was born. Yeah. 33. And so, and, you know, status quo ante, there was extreme sympathy in the East towards Russia. And there are Russian speakers in Ukraine. The counterpoint is like, oh, it's the same justification that Hitler made. There's a guy who speaks German in this country. We're invading him. And so, yes, okay, fair enough. But I just think it seems ludicrous, and also simultaneously, it reminds me of this sort of arguments. And I think it's public record. I'm not a fan, but like the caricatures of George W. Bush, was that he was both horrendously stupid and evil and all powerful. And so, like, what is it? The Russians are getting bogged down in a quagmire in Ukraine, or Putin is just he's going to march into Paris. Like, I think you have to pick a lane.
Yeah. How do you think the war is going to resolve? And specifically, what do you think a common source of endless amusement for both of us, Joe Biden, thinks about said matter?
Yeah. Well, I got a piece that'll come out in a few weeks in the Critic, where I basically said what I've been saying for a while. I think there's an underrated chance of a ceasefire, which is short formally of an armistice, but I think there's also an underrated chance of an armistice this year. I think the rationale is fairly clear. Putin can wait and see on the result of the election in 24, and Biden can cut his losses, unless Biden is insane to think, unless the Democrats convince themselves that Ukraine is an asset in the election. And I just don't think it is. I think it's actually very similar to 2004, where public opinion was sort of neatly divided. There was probably enough people that could, net be bullied into doing the default position of the U.S. government at the time, but that the anti-war thing was actually highly motivated to the anti-incumbent party. I submit that Trump, the former president of the United States, is a more formidable candidate than Mr. Kerry was in 2004, and that Biden is potentially a weaker candidate than George W. Bush was in 2004. So I think it makes sense, and Biden has tried in politics a long time. I think it makes sense to remove motivating factors against his incumbency. And then, what was the second question you asked? Sorry.
Well, what do you think he wants?
Biden?
Yeah.
I think Biden has sort of weaved throughout the Democratic vortex. He's never been an extreme,
anything
hawk of hawks.
Yeah.
But he has voted for a lot of foreign policy interventions, and he's been very, very careful. Biden never leaves the Democratic establishment. And so, with the exception, I think, of Afghanistan, where he produced the 4 days of his presidency where there appeared to be like a person with views and passions. I mean, you think what he wanted, the Afghanistan thing, but I mean, like his speech in the treaty room, his speech defending the withdrawal after the bombing at the Kabul airport.
He wanted 60 Minutes. They were like,
It's
so
like
what
the
about
guy-
girls in schools? And he's like, not in our national interest.
Right, yeah, like he seemed to like have like passion and views on it.
The meds were really hitting that week.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
I
was the
will
ketamine.
Yeah, I will say in 20, if you saw him on the campaign trail in the primary before COVID, it does seem like I'd always sort of deluded myself into thinking perhaps he was more rational on the Russia thing. He does seem to harbor some of these extreme Russophobic tendencies, not nearly as much as Clinton would or other Democrats, potentially enough. Again, I'm not a stalwart in thinking this is a extremely important macro issue, but there is the question of what exactly Biden's relationship was in Ukraine. How is that biasing the administration's handling of this? But that said, I mean, Biden met with Putin in 21, and it seemed like all business. I think this is certainly among the more moderate Democrats one can imagine in this position. And I think he has the political capital and capability to cut a deal if he wants to.
I'm sure we're going to get to the Israel Palestine stuff too, but have you seen this this clip? Speaking of what you're saying, where a lot of the foreign policy establishment have like swung back and forth between Putin's an evil genius and also he's the dumbest guy ever. This clip of Nikki Haley talking about at a rally where she goes, the day that Hamas attacked Israel was the same day as Putin's birthday. Why don't you use that to kick off your thoughts on Israel?
It's certainly original. I had never heard that.
What I wonder is if that was an off the cuff thing, or she was like totally prepared to say that.
Yeah, it's weird. Probably was told to do that by some consultant, but it is in the realm of possibility that she did that herself, I suppose. Which
Is it true? Has anyone fact checked this?
Yeah,
I think it's true. The only thought that occurred to me was whether or not there was some sort of discrepancy between the Orthodox or Soviet calendars and all this. But I think the Soviet calendar, they had stopped doing that stuff by the 50s, and I think the Orthodox. I think it lines up. I think it lines up. I think it was October 7th. So
yeah,
thanks for fact checking.
I think he's born October 7th, 1952. Although there's always there's the Putin conspiracy theories that like his mother's not his mother. His mother was like this woman in Kazakhstan. He's like actually or Georgia or Kazakhstan. He's like half Caucasian, for lack of a better term. So assuming that
too many people read Harry Potter growing up, and they're
I
like,
think he was born in. Well, she claimed until the end. She claimed that she was his mother. That she died in the early 2000s, and but anyways, I think it's true. Why did she say it? I mean, I don't think this stuff has purchase in the majority of the Republican Party, and I'm confident it doesn't have purchase in the broader electorate and with independents. But there are enough, Republicans, and they're often quite affluent, who just can't get enough of access of evil stuff. And, it's like Hamas met with Putin and Kim Jong-un
at their birthday party.
Kim Jong-un was there. Yeah, I mean, it is, they think Team America World Police is like a documentary. Like that's the thing. Why did she say it? I mean, because I think she, serious people, think like this, that they think that there's an axis of autocracy. And it's very hard to keep track of, though. Like, is Hamas far left or far right? It's never fully clear. Like, point of fact, they are like probably pretty far right, but like actually are part of the global far left. So it's very confusing. Mm-hmm. I think it serves a useful narrative to keep the U.S. Involved in a lot of stuff that we shouldn't be.
October 7th, Hamas does its attack on Israel. What was your first reaction? What did you think was going to happen?
Pretty stunning. I mean,
so this wasn't like the Ukraine war where like smart people knew this was coming. There was things going on in the news that would lead one to believe this was about to happen.
No, I don't think anybody really thought it. I remember I had a lunch here in August and of last year of 23, and sort of fairly plugged in person, and the guy was like, remember Islamic terrorism? I did that for 2 decades. That was
radical Islam,
right? And it's like, yeah, exactly. And as soon as somebody says it, it's like, we were sure enough. They didn't make it 2 months, and so like I think there had been. I wrote about this in 22, the previous August. This piece for Attack called "The Rise and Fall of Political Islam," or Rise and Fall of Political Islam. And political Islam is a large topic because I think much of the Islamic world remains politically Islamic, which is to say, giving voters a choice, they would enact some form of conservative Islam into the body policy, into law. But within political Islam, there's obviously the violent tendency. The uber violent tendency, and that is, Al Qaeda, ISIS, etc., Al Shabaab. I think there was a view that there was this guy called Murtaza Hassan at The Intercept, who basically argued that maybe radical Islamic terrorism was like a boomer thing, the Zoomers just didn't, the Arab Zoomers just didn't buy it. And then additionally, I think there had been a view, and I think this is. It was a naive view that Hamas was not capable or willing to involve itself in the tactics that ISIS and Al Qaeda, ISIS really, was super involved in, and that was also wrong. So, and then I think additionally, I think people thought Israel was largely impregnable and hyper competent, and I think it remains hyper competent but not impregnable, clearly. And so it was stunning. It was stunning that Hamas was able to do essentially the greatest military operation by Arab militants since the 70s or the 60s, and it was stunning the depths of their depravity.
So, do you think the October 7th attack was a result of like a lack of good on the ground intelligence?
Intelligence failure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the line emerging in sort of lefty circles is the reason the attack happened. And sometimes they'll caveat and say, but obviously it's unexcusable, is because the world was trying to ignore Palestine. With the Abraham Accords and, the various diplomatic developments that have been happening. It's like people thought they could shove this issue under the rug, and this was the issue showing that it very much is over the rug, and you will not be able to do it. Do you think that's true? Was this a little bit of like attention-seeking behavior?
No, I think it was hugely attention-seeking behavior. I mean, if you had to steel man the murderous attack on Israel by Hamas, you would say that they achieved the following objectives. They apparently, it looks like, put the Israeli-Saudi détente normalization on ice. It's an informal normalization already, clearly, between the governments. But the formal recognition of each other and normalized ties, I think, is on ice for the foreseeable future. Probably. Additionally, they made the Palestinian movement something that has not been, in my memory, maybe it was in the 90s, but in my memory, which is the victim movement of the world. I mean, it is now, it was peripheral, and now it is front and center. Mm-hmm. And it is...
Give other examples of that target, it's like the Tibetans and like the 90s.
This stuff used to be, it was more of a Cold War thing, right? I mean, the IRA thing was big. Tibet, Kurds in the 2000s was a sort of neoconservative hobby horse. Ukraine. Yeah. I think Palestine is now number one, and that's a big deal. That's a shame. I would not have expected, and I generally think I have a pretty good predictive track record, but I would not have expected, whatever you believe, but like I think conservatively can be put that Hamas killed 4-digit Israelis, many of them civilians, the majority of them civilians. They engaged in rape as a weapon of war, and bragged about it. And after that happened, it's possible that net Western sympathy, like population-wise, increased for the Palestinians. This is, it's a very notable, if grim, achievement.
How do you think the Israeli response has been on their own terms?
Vicious.
But I guess in terms of, maybe lay out what you think the Israeli objectives in the response have been, and how effective have they been at prosecuting those?
Ruthless, if not ambiguous, though. It's not clear that they want declared objectives in the slightest. And also, who's they? Who's the Israelis, right? Because there's Netanyahu, Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister, who is fighting political survival. Also, always depends on your frame of Israeli society, but Netanyahu clearly has enemies within the Israeli deep state, for lack of a better term. And so, I think broadly speaking, the leadership of Israel wants to strike back ferociously and continuously at Palestine, and will do so for a while, it seems like. I don't think there's not stated objectives other than that. They notably, to at least as a matter of public information or knowledge, have not taken out what I think are the three big players in Hamas. Mohammed al-Deif, who's the alleged mastermind of the attack, Sinwar, who's the military governor of Gaza, for lack of a better term, and the representative of the diplomatic faction in Doha. They haven't gotten any of those figures. And it's not clear if it's like the highest priority. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. It's maybe a little similar perhaps to the war on terror, where actually getting bin Laden receded from the fore for a number of years. No, I think they want a pretty. It's just not clear what the off ramp is here at all. I mean, a lot of the Arab states don't want more Palestinians. I mean, the clear candidate is Egypt, which has rejected time and again resettlement, and Egypt is really relatively on its back right now. I mean,
do they say why? Do they say why they don't? Like, is it just like we don't want these people here?
If you run an autocracy, you don't have to say sorry.
Yeah.
So, I think they don't think they have the capability, and I think there's also a view that, particularly in Gaza, a supermajority of the population have sympathy for radical Islamic terrorism, and that's not what the sort of military, soft, secular government of Egypt, which has been the government of Egypt for all but 4 years of its modern existence, wants at all. Yeah.
Why do you think this intelligence failure occurred? Did Israel get too comfortable? Did they rely too heavily on their partners like us? Why do you think it happened?
I think Hamas was pretty good. I mean, I think they moved. They didn't use cell phones. They moved house to house every night. And I think also, I mean, there was an intelligence assessment that went to not Netanyahu's government, because he took over in late 22, to Naftali Bennett's government. Naftali Bennett has been notably, in my opinion, more strident in his public utterances in terms of responses to the Palestinians. Perhaps one would submit because he feels more because he rejected these intelligence assessments. But the stuff felt far-fetched, paragliders, like Hamas is trying this, like there was a collective. There's the Errol Morris Donald Rumsfeld documentary. I think it was called The Known Unknown or something. I think, they asked him, like, wasn't 9/11 amazing in retrospect? And Rumsfeld said everything is amazing in retrospect, which is mildly horrifying statement from one of the most important people of the 21st and 20th centuries. But I think it was amazing in retrospect, but it was there all along.
The story of the last few years was the sort of scrambling of the conventional posture on foreign policy with the two parties. The Democrats were extraordinarily hawkish on and very unified in their hawkishness on the Ukraine issue, whereas the Republican Party was much more split. And coincidentally, the center of gravity was more realist and restrained. On Israel and this conflict, it feels like the old battle lines are basically being redrawn. Again, you have kind of a split factions within the Democratic Party, more pro-Israel, less pro-Israel faction, and the Republican Party is fairly unified. Is there anything about the political dynamics domestically that you think are different or notable, or worth paying attention to when it comes to this?
Between Israel, Palestine, and the Ukraine reaction?
Yeah.
The Israel-Palestine one might be electorally more ruinous for Biden.
Explain that.
Democrat. Well, it's a pretty clear trade-off. So if Biden goes super pro-Palestine, which this guy's not going to do, he will have thrown in with his party's base and the street, for lack of a better term, but risks all institutional and financial support and establishment backing. If he ignores and sidelines the base, which is what he's doing, he risks depressed turnout, but will keep the ship of state of the Democratic Party afloat and just pray that the turnout depression is not too bad. And so, again, just looking at it amorally, Biden's probably making the right call for his own survivability. Certainly the more tested approach, versus, I don't know, Republicans aren't in government, and so perhaps this is the point of departure. I don't think it's hard, because if this was in 2022, maybe it would have had this effect, but I don't think these Ukraine divisions are going to functionally split the Republicans in a way that's electorally relevant. And it's also just because the conservative establishment and the alleged conservative elite is just so much more irrelevant in Republican politics than Democratic politics. Like, it just doesn't matter what the National Review Board says about Ukraine. The Republican Party is just going to ignore it. And then additionally, they're going to lose the sort of, lack of a better word, term, the National Review reading senators. They're going to endorse Trump. It just doesn't matter. Versus, I don't know, if Biden actually threw in hard with Palestine, I think we're seeing with a lot of these elite billionaires on the Democratic side demonstrated interest in leaving the party and doing something different. Obviously, the most prominent example being Bill Ackman.
Do you think that Biden is pursuing a meaningfully different strategy in private when it comes to Israel than his public rhetoric has indicated?
I doubt it. I almost always doubt that there's this like trapdoor, and I think people, especially these guys who are super filmed and super scrutinized and super leaked against and super reported on, I think what you see is generally what you get. I think Biden's is from a generation where Israel was a closed issue, a generation of Democrats where, I don't know the exact statistics on this, but at a certain point, support for Israel might have been more of a Democratic thing than a Republican thing. Some of the more famous, Israel-wary, probably the last notable Israel-wary administration, and I think it wasn't that allergic to it was H.W. Bush's, which is the sort of like, you know, old guard WASP Republican style. I mean, James Baker is still alive, the Secretary of State and Chief of Staff, notably tussled with Netanyahu, who's around. I think he was the ambassador to the U.S. back then. He hated him for all reporting. He was like, this guy's a freak, stay away. And then, you know, Baker's career ended and Bush lost, and Netanyahu's has just been has just peaked again and again. I think, yeah, I just think Biden is not that interested in the. Additionally, I mean, the Palestinian leadership is quite different than the reference point that he had in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. So they were actually quite more like I think uber Israeli hawks would disagree with this description, so disclaimer. But in my view, they were a lot more like the sort of IRA, the Irish, in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, the sort of part of the sort of global commando socialistic-y, group. But you see in real time, I mean, how a lot of the Arab leaders, even by the 80s, were getting overwhelmed by the violent religious revival in the Middle East.
Yeah. You are now in charge of a magazine.
Yes.
That will be commenting on these issues and many, many more. I think our listeners are all generally fans of the American conservative. Explain to them why they should be excited about your tenure and what you intend on doing and focusing on in the coming year.
Sure. I think we should all be pro-America and usually favorably disposed to conservatism. So it's in the name.
On nominal reasons alone.
Yeah. It's just the headline is great. It's I think it's the greatest. This is the greatest magazine going. It was founded in 2002 by Pat Buchanan, Scott McConnell, and the notorious Taki. And
you're not going to try the last name.
No. But nor does he have to. He just files as Taki in my own in his defense. But and I mean, I think took the bravest stance that I'm aware of a magazine taking in my lifetime, which is conservative opposition to the Iraq War. And
were you politically lucid at the time?
Yeah. Certainly by 2003, which is, we invaded in March of 2003. And I very much remember 9/11 as well. And then I feel like I don't have the firmest memories of 2002 politically. I was living in this area too at the time, and the most lucid memory that I have of anything political was the sniper, the DC sniper, which nobody outside of DC remembers, but it was scarier than 9/11 in DC. Just deranged duo just shooting people. Went on for weeks. It was terrifying. Even though in some ways it's irrational, I'm probably not going to be shot, but everybody was that was scarier in DC than 9/11. 9/11 was, again, I think the Pentagon attack is forgotten. Like, people could see the fireball from the Pentagon. It was like a real thing. But obviously I think, not nearly as cinematic and as lethal as the New York attacks. But I remember, so you remember 9/11 and you're like, in the 5th or 6th grade, and then you're kind of tuning back in, and you're like, wait, Iraq? What? Even then it just didn't make any sense. And then by the autumn of 2003, it was just so clear. I mean by the summer, by the early summer of 2003, it was clear that it was just gonna go really badly. It's like people are looting things as the country's being invaded. And I remember being very, just my disgust threshold was triggered. It was I don't know if it's so awesome if that we're just encouraging the situation where they're looting the Iraqi presidential palace. Granted, it had been inhabited by a gangster. What kind of society are we incubating here? And I think it was clear we're losing the war by 2004. I mean, the people, you probably don't remember, but the horrifying attack on
it was 6.
What?
I was 6.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. Yeah. I think the spring of 2004 was the horrifying bridge attack, which American contractors, I think they were Blackwater, Eric Prince's outfit, were hanged from a bridge in Iraq. I mean, it was bad. I mean, and this was obvious to me, and I remember TAC was like the only thing where, you know, I was born into a Republican family, where you could read lucid arguments against the war from the right. There were other things that I discovered retroactively. I profiled him before he died, Justin Raimondo at antiwar.com out in SF. There were others, but it was a lonely band.
And so you now run the show.
Yeah.
What are you going to do with it?
Yeah, I was just talking to somebody about this morning about it. It's my job, so I do talk about it. It's I do think it is closer to influence than it has ever been in its history. But I think, you know, I think pretty much everybody who's occupied my chair and been involved in TAC would agree that we have not yet capitalized on our oppressions. And it's what I tell my employees is that being right and being prescient is not enough. I mean, it's called being Cassandra. If you know your Trojan history or Trojan myths, and you know, versus like competence. The world is full of hyper competent mediocrities, and it's actually just, again, immorally, actually sort of better to be that. I think a lot of powerful people in the United States are dead wrong, but they are competent. I think a lot of people in finance are super competent. I think a lot of people running the Democratic establishment are super competent. I think they're dead wrong, but they are in that seat for a reason. So I think we, in some ways, got the hard part right, which is wisdom and prudence. She used fancy words, but
you almost sound like a conservative nonprofit executive.
exactly. But
you're talking about statesmanship next.
Yes. But I think we just got to block and tackle. And so while I'm prepared to work, and I think blocking and tackling is hard, in some ways it's not rigorous. If we can just get our message out there, I continue to believe the sky's the limit. And in a weird sense, it's just super fateful that we are apparently destined to relive the 2010s and do the Trump years again, or at least a big Trump year in 24.
To wrap up, we're trying something new for season 4. We're going to be doing a segment of this show that is just for our paid subscribers on YouTube. If you'd like to join up, you can be either a truther or a statesman. These are the 2 levels. Go to YouTube. You can see we spend a lot of money on like putting 4K cameras up and editing it all together and everything. So we're trying to steer some traffic to the YouTube show and reward our power listeners. And so during these segments, we're going to be talking about interesting personal anecdotes, getting people to predict the doom of the world, that kind of thing. And so Curt and I are both afflicted with a particular disease of the horological variety. We like watches, so we're going to talk about that and a manner of other things. I'm going to ask him why he thinks the world will end or how it will, kind of like he predicted the economy was going to crash last time, and then it did. So go to YouTube and join as a truther or statesman. But Curt, where can people keep up with everything that you are doing in this new role and follow the great work of the American Conservative?
Well, the best site on the net is www.theamericanconservative.com.
He just said the net, and he said www. So
yeah.
He is a millennial, if it wasn't painfully obvious.
Yeah. And apparently we also have the rights to www.amconmag.com, AMCONMAG.
If you skip the www, it still takes you to the website.
No, but it's more.
You're gonna say HTTPS :
No, that feels like math. No, it's words. So no, but the World Wide Web is a thing, and you should type it in. But and then also you can find my Twitter easily at CURTMILLS, Curt Mills. But hopefully you won't have to find us. We'll be coming to you.
Fantastic. Curt, thank you for coming on the podcast, and welcome back to Washington.
Thank you.
Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. We certainly did. It's great to be back in the chair. You know, at some point, someone needs to pull pictures of how Nick used to dress, and he does today. You can see my influence leaching into him like toxic venom. He looks so nice.
Way better than you do.
It's just amazing. He looks so lovely. This is again why you need to go on YouTube. You need to become one of our paid members at the YouTube channel. Be a statesman or a truther and see this beautiful mug up close and personal. Be sure to subscribe on your podcast platforms as well. Rate us 5 stars. Review the podcast. I think we're getting close to 160 reviews on Apple Podcasts. That's a great place to review and show your love. Be sure to subscribe on YouTube. Hit the bell for notifications. Apply to all of our programs. AM Friday, the Fellowship for American Statecraft, Foundations for American Statecraft, Frontiers of American Statecraft, and other things not called statecraft. I'm sure that they exist on our website somewhere.
No,
they don't. I like the term statecraft. We're just going to be doing a ton of amazing stuff this year. Be sure to follow us on social media at ammoment.org. And in general, be sure to stay close. This is going to be a year of a lot of interesting things going on. And we highly encourage you guys to stay plugged in with us. If there's anything we can do to help you, whether it's to get to Washington, D.C. or to achieve great things in Washington, D.C., be sure to email us at our first name at americanmoment.org. The best way to reach me is not by actually emailing me. It's probably through emailing someone else on the team, but try your luck. Who knows? You might get lucky. Thank you guys, as always, for listening. We're extraordinarily grateful to be able to host this show, to run this organization, and to help contribute towards the priorities that we all share here in Washington, D.C. It's going to be a hell of a year, and we'll see you next week. Moment of Truth is an American Moment podcast taped at the Conservative Partnership Campus Studios and is produced by Jake Mercier, Jared Cummings, Tiffany Kutris, and Matthew Pearson. Our intro song is A Minor Struggle by Ryan Serenich, and our website is americanmoment.org.